very driven by this purpose to basically bring healing and more vitality to everyone through restoring your gut health.
So, welcome to us, Lena. This is our very first ever episode of the Wellness Digest. And, before we dive into the interesting topics that we will talk about today, I just thought it would be helpful to share why we started this in the first place. We really were looking for a platform where we can share a little bit longer form content and dive deep into the topics, mostly wellness and all things around wellness that really are on top of our minds. And with that, look into the research, the facts, the science, and also just all the things we're learning on a day-to-day basis through our work at Omni-Biotic and speaking with experts. And today in this first episode, we're going back to the beginning, where it all began, how we discovered Omni-Biotic and what gut health really means.
Yeah, I mean, it was really your personal healing journey that really brought us to Omni-Biotic. And I think it always is really fascinating, I think, for people to hear about because it was a dark chapter in your life, but it was also very transformative.
Yes, this is true. So let's start there, So I've told this story a couple times already, but essentially I went from being a high-performing young professional straight out of college, working in New York City in management consulting, pretty much to being unable to get out of bed almost overnight. Yes, there were symptoms that had kind of crept in over the last few months before that, but I just always attributed them to being stressed or burnt out and never really took them seriously until one day I just had no choice but to. And that really was the start of a long healing journey for me. It took over a year to really get rid of the Lyme, but then also repair my body from all the after effects of Lyme. However, as you said, it was a dark time, but it really introduced me to this world of functional medicine, whole body medicine, and also becoming your own health advocate and detective and really diving deep into the different systems in the body and learning. And one of the things I discovered is just how important the gut microbiome is to our overall well-being. After I had taken multiple rounds of antibiotics to get rid of the Lyme, I still felt so far from well.
Yeah.
I still felt like I was just surviving. And really, the things changed for me, including, brain fog, energy levels, sleep quality, when I truly started healing my gut. So
I feel like before that experience with you, like I hadn't even ever thought about the gut. Like I didn't know what is the gut microbiome. And then through you having that experience of really depleting the gut through antibiotics and treatment and then repairing it and that being so transformative, that then got me interested in like, oh, what is my gut telling me? How can I nourish it? And how will I feel even better?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And for me, really the turning point came when I was talking to a healthcare practitioner in Germany about my struggles back then, and she said, oh, Hannah, you must try Omni-Biotic. It was a fairly new brand in Germany at that time, taking the market by storm, and she was raving about the clinical studies, this new approach to probiotic medicine being targeted and not a one-size-fits-all. And I worked with her to understand what is the formulation that would best fit my needs in that moment. And it was truly a game changer for me. Within a few days, I started feeling improvements that I hadn't felt with probiotics that I had tried here in the US before. And I think, that excitement, and the more I was learning about this brand, I kept asking people to send it to me from Germany. And I kept telling you and my whole family about it. And, that really was the start of bringing Omni-Biotic here to the US.
Yeah, and I remember you tried when you were back here, because you were living in the US at the time, you tried to find an alternative and you tried many different probiotics on the market and you just couldn't find one that had the same impact.
Exactly. And I think we hear this from also the Omni-Biotic community all the time, where they have tried products in the past and they didn't really work, and then they find Omni-Biotic and it makes such a difference. But you had a similar experience. You had your own healing journey with Omni-Biotic, so let's get into that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was less dramatic as yours, but I was living in LA and working at a studio in corporate communications at the time, and long hours, very intense, and I was struggling also with something that I'd been dealing with throughout my life, which is an eczema flare-up, and just overall a little bit of burnout, I would say. And so then you introduced me to Omni-Biotic. I did a bit of a reset with them, and then I moved over to stress release, which I still take today. And it was just, yeah, as you said, life-changing. You finally feel a difference. Your digestion is more regular and stable and seamless, but you're also just feeling clear-minded, more energy. You know, you notice you're getting sick less, and it's a big, big impact on your health. I'd like to fast forward a few years because then you actually got to go to Harvard Business School and you were feeling well again. You lucky stars aligned and you got to meet Anita, Frau Wallner, in Austria, and you had this shared vision of let's bring Omni-Biotic to the US, and you decided there's room for it and there's need for it. So take us back to that time.
Yeah, so at business school, this question, as for many people who are at business school, you keep asking yourself, what do I want to do after business school? Do I go back to what I did before, or is this kind of a turning point? And for me, it was pretty clear with my story that I had just gone through that I wanted to work more in health and wellness. And, this question kept coming up for me of why is Omni-Biotic not in the US? Because still I was struggling to find a good alternative here in the US. And, as you said, lucky stars aligned, we got to meet Anita Frau Wallner, who is the founder of Omni-Biotic and Institut Allergosan, which is the research organization behind Omni-Biotic. And she was also very interested in this idea of bringing Omni-Biotic here. And that's really how it all started. And, as we were really gearing up for this launch and, thinking about all these things, I know I kept coming back to you. You were still in LA, which I was pretty mad at you about. And, I kept saying, like, Lena, from a marketing perspective, what do we need? What do you think of our website? Do we need an Instagram, right?
Yeah.
And you had all these interesting thoughts, and eventually I just decided to give you a bit of a different phone call.
Yeah.
So what did that look like from your side?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I'm so happy you called because I was working in LA. I had in corporate communications, so I had the communications and PR background, but I was really wanting to switch over from entertainment to wellness. And so, yeah, it just came at a great time, and we decided to take on the venture together. And, 4 or 5 years later now, we're still at it. We're very driven by this purpose to basically bring healing and more vitality to everyone through restoring your gut health. So let's start with the basics. What is the gut microbiome, and why is it so important for our overall health?
Yeah. So when I talk about the gut microbiome, I like to start thinking about it as like our control center for health. So our gut is filled with trillions of bacteria and other microorganisms. In a healthy gut, that's mostly beneficial, good bacteria that do things for us. And when people hear about the gut, they think about digestion, bowel movements, but really our gut is the core of so many processes. 70 to 80% of our body's immune cells are located in the gut. The gut is a major gatekeeper of everything we ingest. It basically decides, is this something good that needs to be absorbed into the body, or do I need to expel it out? Our gut and our brain are connected. Our gut microbes help make neurotransmitters like serotonin, which, then if your gut is out of balance, no wonder it impacts your mood and your cognitive function. Our gut and our liver work together to help us detoxify. So it's truly a control center. And I think once you start realizing that, it becomes so empowering. And it also makes sense why, when our gut is off, everything feels off.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned, it's not just related to digestion. However, we always talk about this, digestion is such a huge part of it, because if your digestion is seamless, you're regular, you're feeling good, you have energy, you have clarity, like your quality of life is seriously increased. If something is off, as you said, it influences everything. Your confidence, how you look, how you function, how resilient you are, how long you live. I mean, there's so much research coming out now related to the gut being a major influence on, chronic disease and longevity. So very, very common daily factors contribute to the state of our gut microbiome. So stress is very depleting. Processed foods, alcohol, medications, especially antibiotics, they completely deplete your good bacteria in your gut. So you have to actively work on restoring those after a course of antibiotics. Pathogens, right? We come in contact with pathogens all the time. Traveling, eating out, so
eating raw fish like sushi.
Having sushi, yeah.
I think the way I like to think about our gut microbiome is kind of like a vegetable garden or something that you want to, you want all this variety to grow in your vegetable garden, but if you never water it and you never like put fertilizer on the soil, eventually it will deplete. And that's kind of how our gut interacts with our modern day stressors.
Yeah.
We keep pouring all this stuff in, the processed foods, the antibiotics, the alcohol, the stress, all the things you just mentioned. But if we're not doing anything to replenish, if that accumulates over years, you will deplete your gut microbiome.
Okay, so what happens when the gut falls out of balance? When, as you said, you have more bad bacteria than good bacteria, you have an overgrowth of these pathogenic bacteria. When you have inflammation, which contributes to what we know as leaky gut, that means your gut barrier is actually becoming permeable. So anything you're taking in, toxins, pathogens, food particles actually leak through your gut lining into your bloodstream, which triggers inflammation throughout the body. And inflammation is really what contributes to all kinds of disease and premature aging. So it's really this vicious cycle of the gut being leaky, fueling chronic inflammation, and that leading to disease and aging. So we'll get into kind of in more detail over the next few episodes, like what nourishes the gut microbiome. However, we need to start by mentioning probiotics, because taking a premium probiotic is such a simple yet highly effective way to nourish the gut.
Omni-Biotic is Europe's most well-known probiotic, some might say. Even if you look at the numbers, it's a leading probiotic brand in many European countries. It's actually number 3 worldwide, according to IQVIA data that just came out. And it's at the core of it, it's formulations for specific health needs rooted in deep science and expertise. Institut Allergosan, which is the company behind the products, they're a research institute with over 30 years of microbiome-specific expertise, which informs these formulations. And Anita Frauwallner is the founder of Institut Allergosan and Omni-Biotic. And her journey is very similar to ours in the sense that it was a very personal journey that led her down this path. And even today, it really informs her mission. She lost her first husband to colon cancer when they were both still very young. And she always says that when he passed away, the question she kept asking herself is, what else could we have done? And over time, it kept bringing her back to the gut microbiome. And that's really what started her passion and her researching, and eventually led to founding Omni-Biotic.
So to get into a little bit more detail of like what sets Omni-Biotic apart, these are multi-species, multi-strain probiotic formulation targeting specific health needs. So all of our probiotics will replenish the gut microbiome, will support seamless digestion and optimize your bowel movements. However, Omni-Biotic goes beyond that. And our formulations also support specific like functions and axes in your body. So as Hannah mentioned, there's the gut-liver axis. We have a probiotic for that. It's Omni-Biotic Detox. You have the gut-brain connection. We have a probiotic to support that. Omni-Biotic stress release. I could go on. Second of all of the formulations are clinically tested in its final formulation. So that means the probiotics are tested in human trials, in a clinical setting, in their final product. That is very rare when it comes to probiotics, especially here in the US. A lot of the US brands will say this product is clinically tested, but there's only clinical testing on specific probiotic strains included in the product.
Yeah.
However, you don't know how these strains work together.
Well, and then on top of that, which I'm sure you'll get into, is basically even if you have this research from some lab or somewhere saying this strain does XYZ, you then actually still don't know if it does that also in your product.
Right.
Because you don't even know if the strain like reaches your gut, which gets to the delivery mechanism. So yeah, why don't you talk to us about that?
Yeah, and just one more thing. I mean, research shows that certain probiotic strains work really well together, so they actually work in teams. However, on the other side, some strains can compete for the same food source. You actually might not want them in the same product. There's a reason Omni-Biotic comes in a powder form and not in a capsule. And the reason is that this actually makes the probiotic a lot more effective. A lot more of these good bacteria survive the digestive process and make it to your large intestine alive and active. And Hannah, why don't you explain the actual mechanism?
Sure. So the alive and active is really where it gets to, because in order for the mere definition of a probiotic is a live microorganism giving benefits to the host, in this case, the person. And so the way this works with Omni-Biotic is our probiotic bacteria are freeze-dried before they're being put into this powder. And that essentially puts them in like a dormant mode. So they're preserving themselves. When you mix them in water prior to intake, so you mix our powder in a glass of water or some other kind of neutral beverage, you drink it, the time when they're in the water actually allows them to rehydrate with water. And we also mix some important food sources for the probiotics into this powder, so they find their favorite food. And then when you drink it, they actually make it. They're much more resilient to make this passage through the acidic environment in the stomach and upper intestines. Many probiotics that come in capsules, if the capsule breaks open in your stomach or in the upper part of your small intestine, which is still very acidic, these probiotic bacteria will just soak up the acid and it kills the majority of them.
Yeah, or highly weakens them.
Highly weakens them, exactly. So then I kind of like to think of it as like, do you want like a 20-something-year-old high energy probiotic to arrive in your gut? Or do you want like a damaged old probiotic, you know, to reach your gut? And then of course the 20-something, like the young, vibrant, metabolically active probiotic will do a lot more benefit than the one that's already half dead.
We actually tested Omni-Biotic compared to a couple of the top US brands in a GI tract simulator in the Netherlands. And we found that 83% of Omni-Biotic's probiotics reach the gut alive and active. And that is compared to an average of 7% in these other brands. So you really want to choose a probiotic that actually works and arrives in your gut viable.
So we would love it if you would subscribe. Let us know in the comments any questions, feedback, or any other topics you would like to see. And we hope to see you soon.